I'd like to do a few shout outs before I start my video today. I'd like to shout out DB, that's capital D-B, Obed Calaballero, M. Mathers, Essex Smith, Lewis June, Lee Tripp 2, and Jake Mr. Green Bergaman. Thank you very much for you guys' comments. Very nice of you to subscribe and comment. My video today is on a serious note. I alluded to this story in the past in some of my videos, but I would now like to tell the whole entire story. When I was 17 years old, I was in the Pontiac, Illinois congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. It was a very small congregation and mostly family. There were a lot of teenagers and preteen young people in this congregation. I had a friend who was also 17 that was female. We also hung out with a lot of the younger preteen crowd who happened to be some of my family as well. Now, my cousin, who was considerably older than us, in her 20s, mid-20s, she met a man who was a ministerial servant. They dated, or courted, as Jehovah's Witnesses would call it, and got married. He was 25 himself, probably, and she was as well. He was a nice-looking man. A lot of the sisters wanted to date him, so my cousin was very excited that she was able to nail him down. But there was something off about him from day one. He seemed to me like a kid in a candy store when he came into our congregation and noticed all the young females in our hall. He started to flirt with the young girls in our congregation, and he was very sneaky about this and had no shame in doing it. He was a very good speaker on stage and an excellent spiritual man on the outside. He was a pioneer and did pretty much everything you could think of as far as privileges within the organization. All the while, he was messing around with a 17-year-old friend of mine, which I did not know about at first until later on when she told us. He was also messing around with my 14-year-old cousin, which also I did not know about until later. And he too tried to get with an elder's wife, who was a younger sister at the time, and she was able to reject him. Well, these aren't just rumors and speculation, because for some reason, I always seemed to be around when these things were happening. I remember I overheard a conversation with him and my 17-year-old friend on the phone when he was trying to get her story straight at a time when they were about to be brought before the elders. Now, once the cat was out of the bag as to what he was up to, because my 14-year-old cousin's dad, which was my uncle, caught wind of him messing around with her and brought it forth to the elders. So the cat was out of the bag. Well, did the elders come to the rescue? No, they did exactly the opposite of what they should have done. They did everything they could have to cover up what he had done and to make sure that he was innocent. They interviewed me and along with about 6 or 7 other young people individually and interviewed us about what we knew. They asked us what proof we had. In my interview, they told me that the evidence I had was not enough. They said that overhearing a conversation on the phone was hearsay. There was no way for me to know who was on the other line. There was an incident when him and the elder's wife and I were out in service. And it was just us three. And he kept asking her inappropriate questions about her and her husband's sex life, such as what positions they like and who wants it more, who has a higher sex drive between the two of them, and things like that. That too was not enough evidence to punish him, just it being my hearsay again. Because again, he said none of this happened. So it was me against him. A while later, the elders met with all of us that had evidence against him. There was about 15 of us in the elders' room. We were told by the elders that it needed to be squashed immediately, and that if any of us were caught talking about it, we could be at risk of being disfellowshipped. He was not removed from being a ministerial servant or a pioneer. Not one privilege was taken away from him. My 14-year-old cousin, who swore that they had had oral sex, was then put on the hot seat. These elders put her through the ringer. They had meeting after meeting with her about the situation. They eventually uncovered the fact that she had smoked cigarettes because she confessed to it when pushed to confess any of her sins. So they used that bit of information and disfellowshipped her. In my humble opinion, I believe they did that because she was the one with the most evidence against this ministerial servant, and she had to go. Mainly because she was underage, and they knew that that was going to be a big issue if that got out. They needed the congregation to see that something was getting done, that someone would get punished, since most of the congregation knew at least that something was going on. So they disfellowshipped her, which immediately makes her look like the bad guy and makes it look like that he was indeed telling the truth. This man's wife, who was my cousin, yelled at our younger cousin once they were coming out of the Kingdom Hall after a judicial meeting and called her a whore for making up this story. She was 14 years old. And she did this in the Kingdom Hall parking lot. Okay, so about a year later, this man was appointed elder in this congregation and then was bumped up to coordinator of the body of elders. Fast forward about 18 to 20 years later, when I started to fade out of the organization, I had a meeting with the circuit overseer to discuss a lot of the topics such as the Australian Royal Commission, 1975, and all of those things. I related this story to him. He told me that there was no way that this happened the way that I say it did. Jehovah would not have allowed it. Again, I was accused of hearsay. Granted, this was, like I said, about 20 years ago or so. When I left the organization, I called the police and reported it. The police investigated it. They knew it was some time ago. I let them know that. But they said that they would still look into it. He was removed as an elder as soon as the police got involved. Now, to this day, this is an ongoing issue, an ongoing investigation, I should say. He has been removed as an elder, but as far as I know, there has been no arrest or trial set up. But the elders are still blaming the victim. They called my 14-year-old cousin, who of course now is no longer 14, who is grown, and they told her that now was the time to tell the truth because the police are involved. And they told her that if she's been hiding anything all these years, that she would be accountable for it. She's reinstated now and has been for years. She was also told that if this really did happen, that if her and him really did mess around and have oral sex, she could get disfellowship for fornication. And so she needs to be prepared for that. How ignorant of the elder for that. Some who knew the truth or fathom that Jehovah used an apostate like me to bring all this to light. How ignorant of the congregation publishers to think that way. This was in my tiny congregation in Pontiac, Illinois. Imagine what's going on out there in larger congregations, in small congregations all around the world, where people are silently suffering because of these policies and elders. It just goes to show you that it is time to leave. If you're a Jehovah's Witness and you've heard of anything like this, or you've been involved in anything like this, use your brain, use common sense, and it is time to go. Get a hold of me and my email at Tory, Tory, 848 @gmail.com, and I will help you get out. It's not easy. My entire family, brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, and aunts, will never speak to me again. Some of them will never speak to me again, even if I decided to go back, which I never will, because of the trouble that I've caused by getting the police involved in a situation where they should have been involved in from the beginning. That is all I have today. Please give me your thoughts.